G'day everyone, my name is Hoy, and in this video I'm going to show you some of my productivity tips and tricks to speed up your workflow in Photoshop. I'll even throw in some bonus nerdy tricks at the end, like changing your icons to a banana, coffee or toast, so you can be the envy of your other nerdy Photoshop friends. Now this isn't an exhaustive list of tips and tricks because that would be an hours-long video, but rather these are my common techniques that I use in my day-to-day use of Photoshop. As usual, if you want to follow along, the links to the images are in the description. Now the first tip is how to speed up your Photoshop. Now you might be using Photoshop on a day-to-day basis, and over time you might have seen that the performance of Photoshop has slowed down a bit. So the first setting that we'll check is our RAM. So let's go to Edit, go down to Purge, and what you want to do is purge all. Just make sure that you don't want anything from your clipboard or your history or your video cache. In my case, I don't want anything, so I'm just going to click on all. It's going to throw up a message saying this cannot be undone. I'm just going to press OK. The next thing that you might want to check is in your preferences. Now on a Mac, let's go to Photoshop and go down to settings. On a PC, I believe your preferences are under edit, and preferences should be down here somewhere. So I'm just going to go back to my settings and go to performance. In my preferences, there are several settings that you might want to check. The first one is how much RAM you want to allocate Photoshop. Now I've got 64 megs worth of RAM and it's allocating 70% of that. Depending on your performance and your laptop or computer, you might want to dial that up or down. Now you don't want to dial it all the way up because that will mean that Photoshop will use all your RAM and leave nothing to, your browser or your Explorer or your Finder. So you want to leave a little bit to other programs as well. Now the next thing that you might want to check is your history states. This is the level of undos that Photoshop will be able to make. So if your Photoshop performance is really struggling, you might want to reduce the number of history states here. Basically, it will limit the number of undos that you can do, if that makes sense. Now I'm just going to cancel out of that, but if you make any changes, make sure that you press OK. I'm just going to press OK just for the sake of it. Now the other setting that you might want to check is your autosave, or how frequent it autosaves. Now let's go back to our settings. Now remember, on a PC it's under edit and preferences is somewhere down here. I'm on a Mac, so I'm just going to go to Photoshop settings and go to file handling. And the autosave, I believe the default is at 10 minutes, but if yours is more frequent, as say at 5 minutes, then it might be slowing down your computer depending on your performance of your computer and how old it is, etc. Now, if you're not too fussed about how frequent it saves, then you might want to even put it to 15 minutes, 30 minutes, etc. Obviously, the risk is that, if you've done 15, 30, 60 minutes worth of work and you didn't autosave, then you might lose all that work if you didn't manually save that already. I'm happy with 10 minutes, but you might want to change yours. So I'm just going to click 10 minutes and press OK. Now with the system settings out of the way, let me show you the first productivity tip, which is the repeat transformation. Now what repeat transformation is what the name actually suggests, is repeating the transformation that you've done. Let me show you how it's done. So I'm just going to go to File, New, and then go down to Custom. I'm just going to use a 1000 pixel by 1000 pixel canvas. I'm just going to accept all this. This is not really relevant for our purposes. And then I'm just going to drag out some guidelines so I know where the dead center of my canvas is. Now, I've already got my rulers out here. As you can see, you can press Command or Control R if you don't see it. I've just switched it off. I'm just going to switch it back on by pressing Command or Control R. And then to draw up some guidelines, all you have to do is go up to your rulers here and then click and then just drag it down to where it snaps. So you can see that the snap happens when it's at around about, well, not around about, at exactly 500 pixels here. I can do the same thing for my vertical axis. So click and drag all the way down here and then snap it at 500 pixels. I'm going to draw a circle, select my ellipse tool, and then press shift on my keyboard. And then I'm just going to get my move tool and position it somewhere like that. It will make it easier for me if I see my transform control. So I'm going to press Command T on the keyboard, and that will snap it to place, so I know it's dead center. I'm just going to confirm that by pressing this check mark, or I could have pressed return or enter on my keyboard. So what I want to do is draw a smaller circle here. So I'm just going to make a new layer by pressing this layer icon here and make sure that my ellipse tool is still selected. Then press shift and then just click and drag until I get a, say, 50 pixel circle. Release that when I'm happy with it. Just change that to 5 pixel just for aesthetic, nothing else. And I'm just going to move that to somewhere here so it snaps. And then what I'm going to do is I want to see the anchor point. So I'm going to press Command or Control T, and you see that this anchor point is here. That's what I'm interested in. If you don't see this anchor point, make sure that this check mark is checked. And once you have it, click and drag it all the way down to the middle of that bullseye here. The one issue with this is that this anchor point doesn't snap to the grid line, which is quite annoying, frustrating even. What we have to do is manually make sure that this is on the dead center. So let's zoom in by pressing Option or Alt and scroll our wheel mouse up, and then we can just click and drag so it says 500 and 500. I'm okay with that. I'm going to fit it to screen by pressing Command or Control 0. So what I want now is I want 30 of these smaller circles to go around the perimeter of this bigger circle. Let's go up to our toolbar here, and this suggests what angle it should be. I don't know what the angle is, so I'm going to type in 360, which is the 360 degrees of a circle, which is around this bigger circle here, divided by the number of shapes that I want. So I want 30, and then I'm going to press enter. You can see these fields has calculated that there's going to be 12 degrees in between each one. That is fantastic. I didn't need to do a single math in my head or a calculator, and that goes along with any of these fields here or any of these fields where you can type in the number. To repeat the transformation, let's press Command Option Shift T, and then just keep pressing T as you go along. And that's how you repeat a transformation without doing it manually. Now the next tip I want to show you relates to the lasso tool. So I'm just going to select my free transform lasso tool here, and then I'm just going to mask this out using my freehand lasso tools. So for the sake of this tutorial, I'm just going to make a very quick outline here because it's not a masking tutorial. Here I've click and drag along the hand here, but here the next bit is a straight line. The Polaroid is very straight. So instead of using my freehand controls, I'm just going to press Option or Alt on my keyboard, and I'm going to release my mouse, and then this polygonal lasso tool will turn into a straight line here. Once it turns into a straight line, I'm going to click. I'm not dragging, I'm just clicking. I'm just going to click here, click once here, and then click once here. Now, once I need to do a free transform selection again, I'm just going to let go of Option, and I'm going to make sure that my mouse is still pressed, and then I'm going to click and drag to finish that freeform selection. I'm going to mask that out by pressing on this mask icon there, and just to see how good or not good my selection is, let's make a solid color adjustment layer, and let's select any color, click OK, and move it back there. So you can see that my mask isn't perfect, and again, this isn't the point of the tutorial here. The point was to transform the freehand lasso tool to a straight line lasso tool, or the polygonal lasso tool. Now say that I don't like this peachy color. but I saw on the web somewhere a color that I like and I want to steal that color. Well, instead of installing plugins to steal colors from your other applications, you can actually do it in Photoshop. Now here I've got Adobe's website up, and just say I want to steal this color blue here because for some reason I really like it, but I don't know what the hex code is. So what I can do is go to Photoshop and click on I for my eyedropper tool here, and then make sure that you click on your canvas here. So once you click on your canvas, you can see that the foreground color has changed to the color that I clicked on, provided that your layer is selected, not your mask, your layer. So if you want to steal a color from outside of Photoshop, just make sure that your eyedropper tool is selected, click and drag it outside of Photoshop, and then you can see here that the color changes wherever my mouse goes. Now at the moment my hand is pressed on the mouse, I'm not letting go of it, so the color will change as I'm scrolling around. So let me just choose this dark blue color here and then release, and that will set my foreground color to whatever I've selected here. I'm just going to expand my window again, and with this layer selected, I'm going to press Option or Alt on my keyboard and press Delete. If you want to know the hex color here, you can either double click on here or the foreground palette here, and this is your hex code there. Now that we have the blue selected, it's very obvious that my mask here wasn't great. So let's just fix that. So I'm going to press B for my brush tool and just make sure that my mask is selected and make sure that I've got black as my foreground color. I'm just going to make my brush smaller. Now here's another tip. You can press the left bracket key to make your brush smaller. The left bracket key is next to the P on US keyboards, or you can press the right bracket key to make the brush bigger. Now although that is a simple shortcut, that's not my preference when I'm resizing my brush. What my main preference is to use a combination of the keyboard and the mouse, because my hand is already on the keyboard and mouse. I don't have to lift it and go to the left and right bracket keys. So on a Mac, you can go Control, Option, left click on your mouse and then drag it to the left to make it smaller, or drag it to the right to make it bigger. With my Control, Option and left mouse key still pressed, I can go up to decrease my hardness, and then I can go down to increase my hardness. Now if you're on a PC, it's Alt, right click on your mouse to go left to make it smaller, and then right to make it bigger, and then same to increase your softness or reduce the hardness, and then down to increase the hardness. So I'm just going to make it something like this, and you can see that this bit is not a very natural stroke for me here, right? So what I want to do is position or orient the canvas so it's more natural for my hand to go. So what I can do is press R on my keyboard. You can see that my cursor has changed into this little icon here. Click and then twirl it around, and then press B on my keyboard again, and then I can position it in a way that is more natural for my hand to brush that out. Now again, this isn't a masking tutorial. I don't have my Wacom tablet with me, so this is not a good mask, but it is providing a more natural feel for my mouse to go into. So you can see that if you took the time, your mask will be a lot nicer than mine. Once you're done with it, you can press Escape and it will return it back to the original orientation. And the next thing I want to show you is how to align objects or text against the canvas. So T on my keyboard to invoke the text tool. I'm going to click on that. Just make sure that I've got a different color so I can see it. White is okay. And then I want to accept that. Now at the moment, let's just exaggerate it for effect. I want this lorem ipsum text to be centered. Now I can click and drag so I can invoke the smart guides here, but it's a bit fiddly. I have to sort of guess where the middle is and then sort of slow down my mouse movements and, you know, make sure that it's in center. There is a better option. So if I just do that again here, I'm going to press Command or Control A to select the whole canvas, and then with my move tool selected, or I can press V on the keyboard, I can just select this option here, and then that will go right to the center. Now this text is too high, so I want to move it down, but I don't want to disturb the vertical position. So what I can do is press Shift and then click and then drag it down. Shift will constrain the movements vertically. So now that I'm okay with that, I'm going to deselect that by pressing Command or Control D. Now I can do the same for any shape. Just for variety, I'm going to use this rectangle shape here and then just select the fill so you can see it, and the stroke maybe of green just so you can see it. And again, you can do the same thing, Command or Control A, and then make sure that your move tool is selected and then click on that. And then if you want to center it vertically, you can also click on this button here, and that's the vertical bit. Now you might be wondering, well, that's a bit fiddly, why would I want to use that? Well, in my workflow, I use it for my thumbnail. If you've seen my thumbnails, you might see that there is a colored rectangular box to the side. Now let me just mimic that. And that is just to signify to viewers like yourself that is my tutorial, a how to Photoshop tutorial, as opposed to any other tutorial. So let me just mimic that and just select any color. So that I'm going to press Option Delete. That's Alt Delete if you're on a PC. Now, because I have this yellow bar here, I want this text to be in the center of this blue canvas, not the whole canvas here. So what I do is then make a guide here, and then with my marquee selection tool selected, I just make a selection like this. I went too far here. Let me go back a bit, and then click on the lorem ipsum text, because that's the layer that I want centered. Because it's already centered, you're not going to see the difference. So let me replicate that again. And with my move tool selected, let's click on that. And that is now in the center of that blue canvas here and not the whole document. The next thing I want to show you is selecting different layers without having to go to my layers panel here, because if I'm working on here or here, I don't want to go all the way here and then all the way back here. If I want to select this layer here, I can't, because my lorem ipsum text is active here. So even if I click on this background image here, it's going to move the text here. So I'm just going to undo that, Command or Control Z. But if I hold down my Command or Control and then click on the image here, now you can see on the layers panel that it's selected what I've clicked on. Now again, if I want this selected, I can press Command or Control and then click on that, and then you can see that. All it's doing is just temporarily activating this auto select option here. If you want it permanently on, you can select this check mark here, and then you can simply just click on a element of your design and then move it around. But my habit is to leave that unchecked and then just click on Command or Control and then just click and drag and move the object that I want. The next tip has got to do with your layers. So if I want to make this rectangle appear behind this Polaroid here, I can obviously click and drag it so it's behind or underneath this layer. But again, it's time consuming to have to go from here all the way to the layers panel and back again. So with my rectangle layer selected, the keyboard shortcut is Command or Control, left square bracket, and then that will go down. If you want to go up in the layer stack, press Command or Control and then right square bracket, and that will bump it all the way up. If your layer is all the way up the top, but you don't want to click on Command or Control left bracket key so many times, you can bump it all the way down by pressing Command or Control Shift left bracket key, and that will bump it all the way down. If you want to go back up all the way to the top, it's Command or Control Shift and right bracket key. The caveat is if you're in a group. So let me just demonstrate that. So say my rectangle 1, layer 1 and lorem ipsum is in a group. I'm going to select all that, Command or Control G to put it in a group. And if I want this rectangle to the bottom of this layer here, I have to press Command or Control Shift left bracket twice, because the first press will just simply put it to the bottom of that group here, not all the way outside of that group. So let me demonstrate that. So Command or Control Shift left bracket, that's still within the group. So let me just demonstrate that. See, that's still within that group. And then with that at the bottom of the group, I have to press that again, Command or Control Shift left bracket, and that will bump it to the bottom outside of the group. So let me just undo that because I just did it for demonstrative purposes. Now our layers are getting a bit messy with just default labels here. So let me show you a tip to rename it fairly quickly. It'll save you seconds. It's not one of those things it'll save you minutes. To rename this, double click on that. You probably already know that. So I'll rename that to pink rectangle. But don't press Return or Enter on your keyboard. If you want to rename your next layer, you can press Tab and then it will go down to the next layer, and now you can simply continue typing. Now this is my sidebar, and then I press Tab and then I can rename it. So don't press Enter, otherwise you'll have to keep double clicking on the layer that you want to rename. Now if you want to go up the stack instead of going down, once you're on this layer and you've got this label active, you can press Shift Tab and that will go up instead of down. So while we're here, let's rename that to text and picture tab, and we'll go solid color BG for background. And now that I'm done with everything, I can press the Return or Enter key. Now the next tip I want to show you is how to erase with your same brush instead of using your eraser tool. So I'm just going to make a new layer. I'm going to get my paintbrush, B for my paintbrush. I'm just going to select any color. Now this is an awful design, so don't judge me on my design. Judge me on my tips that I'm giving you. So I'm going to just create some wavy lines here just to add an effect. Say that I've made a mistake here. Now I can erase that by pressing E on the keyboard, and that will bring up my eraser tool. Now you can instantly see that my eraser tool has gotten a lot smaller. The size of my eraser tool is 16 pixels and my opacity is at 100 and my flow is at 57%. But if I go back to my brush tool, it's at 35 pixels and my opacity is at 100% and my flow is at 100 as well. So it's at different settings. So if I were to use my eraser tool, I would have to redo my flow to 100 and then resize it. Now, admittedly, that's not going to take that long to readjust it to your liking. But what I prefer is use the same setting as my brush to erase it. So I'm just going to press B on my keyboard again. And then if you press the tilde key, I can erase it with the same brush settings as I'm painting with. So just say I didn't like this stroke here. And then I'm going to release my tilde key and then just continue on with my design here. So tilde key and then just click and drag and scrub that out. Now you saw when I created this layer here, it automatically created on top of the active layer. So if I click on this again and I create a new layer, see how it's on top of that. So if you ever want it to be underneath the layer, all you have to do is press Command or Control before you press this icon here, and then it will be created underneath this layer. But I don't need this layer here, so I'm just going to delete it. The next thing I want to show you is the keyboard shortcut to cycle through your blend modes. So this is the layer blend modes, which is here on your layers panel here. And normally what we do for our blend modes is we click on the layer that we want to change the blend mode of, and then you click on this and then you can see the blend mode, right? So you can also do that using keyboard controls. So with my move tool selected, I'm going to select my pink rectangle layer here and then press Shift plus, and then that will cycle through the blend modes. If I want to cycle up the blend mode, I can press Shift minus. Now the key thing here is to make sure that you've got your move tool selected. You can click on here, or you can press V on the keyboard. Now before I show you the next thing, I wanted to get rid of this line here, this grid line here. So I'm going to select my move tool here, and I'll just hover on top of it, and you can see that the cursor has changed into this double arrow. Now this double arrow only allows me to go from left to right, but my mouse is closer to this horizontal ruler here. So if I press Option or Alt on my keyboard, you can see that it has transformed my vertical guidelines into a horizontal guideline. Now if I move it all the way up into the ruler, it has made it disappeared. Now if I do that again for the horizontal line, it also works for this. So if I want to flip it around, I can press Option or Alt and then click on the guideline and then just convert it to a vertical guideline. You can see that. And if I don't want it, I can just push it all the way into the ruler, and then that would disappear. You can also make all the guidelines disappear by right-clicking on a grid line and then pressing Clear Canvas Guidelines. Okay, so the next thing that I want to show you is how to import a lot of images into one Photoshop document. Now, most people, when they want to do that, is that they will go to File, Open, navigate to the folder, and then click and press Shift and click and then Open. And what that would do is open it in different tabs, right? And then what you need to do is either copy and paste it into one single file, all these images, or you can click and drag it to move it to an image here. But that is time consuming, and because we want to be professionals here, we want to increase our productivity, we're not going to do that. Now I want to close all this. Now there's a keyboard shortcut to do that, which is Command or Control W, and that will close each one of these. But even that is too slow for us. So what I want to do is only keep the file that we were using, which is this one here. Now I've simply used the mouse to click on this worksheet here. But if you want to know, the keyboard shortcut is Command tilde, and that will cycle to the next worksheet, to the next worksheet. If you want to go backwards, it's Command or Control Shift and then tilde key, and that will cycle backwards. Let's go to File and go to Close Others, and that will close everything else except the one that I want open. Now let's show you the quicker way to open a heap of images into one file. Let's go to File and go to Scripts, go to Load Files into Stack, and then you have an option of loading files or folders. The difference is that if you've got your images all in one folder is your best option. But if you've got your files in different locations, in different folders, then you might want to click on Files. Now, because I've already got all my images in one folder, I'm going to click on Folder, click on Browse, and I'm already on my Images folder. So I'm going to click on Open, which is off the screen, and we've got two options here which I'll just explain very quickly. So automatically align source images means that if you've captured images that are really the same image but maybe at different times, like a time lapse, or at different exposure, maybe you're taking a landscape, but basically the image is really the same but you've got multiple copies, what Photoshop will do if you select this option is try to align all the images together, stack them on top of each other so that they align. Now the second option is saying that it will create a smart object after it loads all the layers. So you have one single smart object after all the images are open. I don't want either of these, so I'm just going to press OK, and Photoshop will open it all into one file. You can see that it's stacked on top of each other, and what I want to show you is the use of layer comps. And what layer comps are is that it gives you the ability to save different versions of your designs or your images into one Photoshop document. So if you've got two different designs of roughly the same thing, you don't have to send two different files. So let me just show you. Now, let me just fix up this image here, just so we notice the difference a little bit. I'm going to make myself some room on this canvas, C on my keyboard to invoke the crop tool. And I'm just going to stretch this out just to make a little bit more room. Press enter or return on my keyboard. And I'm just going to start spreading these out. So I can use all the tips and tricks that we've learned to select this layer. So command click to select this picture here, and then just move it out here. Command click on this, and then I'm going to want to rescale that by pressing Command or Control T. That will bring up our transform control handles, and then just make it a little bit smaller. Put it somewhere like this. Now this is really random. I just want to show you two designs here, so I'm just going to resize this a bit. I think there's a layer behind this. Whoops. Press Command click, select that. Yep, there is another picture underneath that. I want to bump this all the way to the top. Now, instead of going to the layer and finding the layer and then dragging it up here, do you remember the shortcut to bump it all the way to the top? Now you've won yourself brownie points if you've said Command or Control Shift and then right bracket key, and that will bump it all the way to the top. Now I'm just going to squeeze that small a little bit so we can see all the other images, and that looks okay for our purposes. Now I'm just going to put a solid color behind that. Not that it matters, but since we're here, we may as well. I'm just going to bump it down all the way down. Now it's Command or Control Shift and left square bracket, and that will give us the layer at the bottom. I'm just going to create a text layer. Now the text layer is all the way down the bottom. Just going to bump that all the way up to the top. Now we've got good practice now, so who can remember it? It's Command or Control Shift right square bracket key. That will bump it all the way to the top. And I'm going to double click on this and say this is version 1. Click on this. I'm just going to make it bigger. Command or Control T, and just going to size this up a bit. Now this is awful, so don't judge me on this. It's not the point of this technique, but just to show you how layer comps work. So let me just choose a yellow color here and then choose that. Okay, so we've got version 1 here. Now I want to do version 2 now. I'm going to duplicate that by pressing Command or Control J. I'm just going to turn off the original layer, and then I'm just going to put it down somewhere here, say 2, and I'm going to make a smart object now. So with my top layer selected, press Shift, scroll all the way down, click on the last layer, right click on the empty layer and press Convert to Smart Object. Now what I want to do is get my layer comp menu here. If you don't see it, go to Window and just make sure that layer comps is selected. And what I want to do is create a new layer comp by pressing on this icon here. Whoops. Before I do that, let's enter into the smart object and let's turn this off. Let's start off with version 1, and let's do that again by creating a new layer comp. And this is, say, version 1. My comment is, say, this is my holiday. And what we want to do is to apply my layer comp or my version of this design. I want to apply my visibility, my positioning, where all my images are, my appearance, which not only takes into account my layer styles, but also my blend modes, my opacity, my fill, etc. And because we're using smart objects, we want to make sure that this is selected as well. So I'm going to press OK. And for layer comps to have value, you should have more than one version. So if you only have one version of a design, don't use layer comp. So let's create a version 2. With version 2, I'm going to turn this off and then turn this on. And maybe just to make sure that there are differences that we can see, I'm going to swap these images around. So I'm going to select this by pressing Command or Control, click on this. And I'm going to move this one here, Command or Control, click on this grayscale image here, and then just swap them around. And then I'm going to create a layer comp by pressing this one here. I'm going to call this version 2. I want the visibility, I want the positioning, I want all these to be applied. So I'm going to press OK. So then when I press on version 1, you can see that you have the version 1 here and then the version 2 here. So you might be asking, well, wow, that's great. But if I send it to someone, how can that person see that? That's a good question. So let me address that. So I'm going to click on this X icon here and then make sure that you save it. So when they open the file here, ask them to go to Properties, and then in your Properties panel, you can see this options here. So click on the down arrow here. You can go version 1. This is my version 1 and version 2. If as editor you make any changes, so let me demonstrate that by clicking on this, and then say I change the positioning of this version 2 here. I'm going to command click on this and then just change it up here, right? So we've got to make sure that we've saved the changes. So I'm going to click on my layer comp menu here, and then what I want to do now is I want to make sure that I update my layer comp by pressing on this icon here. So when I go back into it, so here, my version 2 is here. And then once you close your smart object, make sure you also save it here. Now, the last thing that I want to show you has nothing to do with your workflow or increase your productivity, but stick around because I think it's pretty cool and you'll probably be the envy of your friends and family. I'm pretty sure of that. Okay, so the first thing I want to show you is how to change these 3 dots, the ellipses, to a banana. Why? Because we can. There's no other reason why. So to do that, let's click and hold until this comes out, and then once you have this customized toolbar here, let's press shift and then press done, and voila, you've got a banana just for fun. Now if you don't like it, you can always turn it off. You can go click and hold, and instead of pressing shift, press command or control and then click on done, and that will reset it. But why wouldn't you go for the banana? Because it's so cool. Now, the next thing I'm going to show you will give you coffee and toast. What could be better than that? Let's go to Photoshop, Settings, and Interface. Now, remember, if you're on a PC, your preferences are, I believe, in Edit, and then somewhere down the bottom is Preferences, and then once you're there, go to Interface. Now here you can change your color scheme to darkest, darker, light, and lightest. So you can change this by pressing Option or Alt and Shift, and then click on this, and that will give you toast. Does it do anything to your productivity? No. Does it help your workflow? No. But does your cool level goes up? Definitely yes. Where is the coffee then? So with your toast visible, let's press Command or Control Shift, and then click on that. It still works the same way. It just, the icon is different. Now, if you want to revert it back to default, you press Option or Alt and Shift, and then click on that, and then that will return it back to these default, and then press OK. And that are some of my favorite productivity tips and tricks. And for bonus, I've even showed you how to increase your cool factor by giving you a banana, coffee, and toast. So if you've enjoyed this video, please make sure that you like this video, comment, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you can get notified for when the next video is out.